And I think I'll do a little overview of what Venture for People is, why we're doing this episode, and introduce the guests. So, my name is Navin Goyal. I'm CEO and co-founder of Loud Capital, and very happy to be here. Very excited to do our second episode of Venture for People: Hidden Gems. And as a reminder of what Venture for People is, it's our tagline at Loud Capital, and it's really our ethos and philosophy of building businesses, investing in businesses, spending time with people doing business that basically benefits people. And so there's enough money, energy, time put on things just to make money out there. With my medical background and kind of moral compass, I feel very strongly that entrepreneurship, investing, education, all can do things in the form of venture capital to push society forward, push people forward, build things that do make money, so do make profit, but starting with a purpose first. And so anything we do at Loud Capital usually has that ethos. And so I thought Venture for People would be a great series to talk about specifically some great entrepreneurs that we'll meet here in a second and what they're trying to solve as problems. And perhaps as investors, entrepreneurs, people interested in helping people might come up and brainstorm with ideas or ways to help solve those problems. It doesn't even have to be the company that exists right now, but how can we, as smart individuals and creative individuals, come up with solutions that we see a lot of problems too, and sometimes we don't even recognize that there are problems in our backyard. So I'll move on and kind of introduce my guests here. I'm actually in Los Angeles in the Revry studio, and so I want to first introduce Damian Pelliccione, who is CEO and co-founder of Revry. And I'm excited to be here. I'm obviously using your office space and using your internet, and I can hear you probably between the walls here, but I'm just excited to be here and introduce you, and perhaps you can say hi and do a little introduction for yourself.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, Naveen, and thanks, Wolf. We're so excited to be part of both Loud Capital and the Pride Fund, and we're so excited that we actually get to meet in person here in Los Angeles. We've had a really fun couple of days. So I'm Damian Pelliccione. I am the CEO, and I always say one of four fabulous co-founders of Revry, the world's largest and first LGBTQ global TV networks. Myself, founded by Leah J. Daniels, our COO, LaShawn McGee, our Chief Product Officer, and Christopher Rodriguez. And I just starting by saying, what makes us extremely unique and special, besides the fact that we're four best friends, is that between the four equal co-founders, we represent African-American, Latinx, immigrant, non-binary, veteran, and LGBTQ and women-led communities for founding teams, which makes us extremely unique and very well poised for the future.
That's awesome. And I'm definitely excited to dig into that and why that even matters in 2021. And I'll introduce Wolf, my friend and partner in crime in a lot of things, CEO and co-founder of Atlas Partners. He's the managing partner of the Pride Fund, which we'll also get into, and just a badass community person to know. And so perhaps you can give a few sentences on your background, my friend.
Wow. Thank you. I don't think I can top that. But it's wonderful to be spending time with both of you out here. Also, we're doing a West Coast tour for the show and for the fun that we've been keeping sort of under wraps. But I can't tell you how great it is that Warner is on here. I have not seen you since the pandemic. Ron, thank you for jumping in. That's awesome. Natalie, congratulations. We all heard the news last night about your work that you're doing for the community and with the foundation. Thank you. I can't wait to see you when we get back. And Danielle's on here as well, who is one of the two partners helping us with our Big OZ project. So it feels like a bit of a homecoming from the road. And Damian, thanks for letting me use your partner's office / guitar for the next hour.
That's awesome. So, I mean, I want to get right into it. We obviously have limited time, and I'm very excited to talk about this. So tell me a little bit about, Damian specifically, tell me about Revry, why you started it, what you're feeling about the company and its kind of potential of impact, right? Obviously, we're Loud Capital as investors, Pride Funds investors. So we're investors into this. We believe in you. We believe in the team. We believe in the impact. But I'm personally, I'm privy to a lot of these hidden gems, is what we're calling it, where it makes so much sense of what you're doing with Revry and what you're doing for the community. And that's actually what I get excited about to share for people who don't get the opportunity to come to LA and be in this cool studio.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, look, I think just to kind of summarize, who, what, when, where, why, Revry, we started with, passion and a lot of experience between the four co-founders in the industry in different kind of fields. And combining all of that knowledge and the fact that the sector that we are working in right now is very new. Streaming, for context, Netflix had their first original show in 2011, just 10 years ago, right? And the onslaught of streaming since the pandemic has just been a huge spike because we have everyone's undivided attention because you've been stuck, in quarantine at home, and you're burnt out on watching your typical, four apps: Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, and maybe HBO. So, from just a business standpoint, now is the time. This is the inflection point. This is where, the tides are really turning, not just in Hollywood, but I think even on a global scale for what we are doing. And then on the flip side to this, from the impact, to answer your question, Navin, is that, no one else is doing it, and no one's doing it at the scale that we are doing it today. We've had a few folks who were prior to us early on in broadcast, like Here TV and Logo Television, which is owned by Viacom. But, those are broadcast networks that are restricted by telco local satellite airwaves. Now you just need an ISP, an iPhone, an Android, an iPad, a device like Roku or Amazon Fire, and you can plug into so much great content. And we know, even just outside the United States, that our community needs to see themselves authentically reflected in media, because typically when you're a kid, the first touch point, whether you're, if you're a queer kid or part of our community, is that you see things in media and you see how, I remember like Will and Grace and Jack, and I remember the original Queer as Folk on Showtime. And I remember, I always say that I'm going to date myself now. I just turned 40, but like, going to to Blockbuster, and there was like one little sliver of wall that was LGBTQ, like VHS tapes or DVDs, that I would rent and watch everything probably 2 or 3 times because, that was where my story was told. And so from an impact standpoint, we've had folks across the globe write us letters, whether it was Saudi Arabia, Russia, India, China, even in our own backyard, Kansas, Tennessee, remote parts of Canada. I'm trans, I'm non-binary, I'm lesbian, I'm gay. I've never seen a movie, a TV show. I've never seen a music video before of an out artist. And this is where, it's really exciting because that impact is rippling across, generations. It's rippling across gender. It's rippling across sexual orientations. And it's also rippling to our, heterosexual allies, to be able to educate themselves and feel more comfortable around queer people, where media becomes the most powerful tool to create change. Oh, I think you're on mute.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that's one thing that I've realized is how influential media is. And I've been watching Netflix and Hulu and all these things like that. And I probably take for granted. I am a heterosexual guy, and I don't think about a lot of the things that I've learned from you and Wolf, just talking about all these things that mean a lot to a lot of different people. Again, I take it for granted. So tell me how do you talk to people who have not thought about this? Again, 6 months ago, I was not thinking about this. How do you get allies, right? Because in the end, a person like me, I want to spread the word to people outside the community, which I think is the big impact. And you kind of tapped into it, that it's about us getting more comfortable But can you kind of dig a little bit deeper on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always, when I answer these types of questions, I always talk about two different sides. Let's talk about the money and the monetary value of the community, and let's talk about the impact that it has with people outside the community. So first answer to this question is, there was a Gallup poll just last month that came out that 5.6% of the entire population of the United States is identifying as LGBTQ or queer. That 5.6% has a disposable income of $965 billion a year just in the US. Almost $1 trillion in disposable income for that small percentage. That is a very healthy and wealthy economy. It actually is the 12th largest economy in the world, believe it or not. And so there's lots of opportunity cost, and there's definitely an addressable market there that no one else is, from a media perspective, really addressing at scale, and definitely not at scale on a global perspective. And internationally, it's 5 trillion, and that's with what little data we have on disposable incomes in other countries abroad, right? So it's good business, period, right? And then on the other side of this, when we look at like just our audience demographic, Revry right now, we hit a really strong millennial Gen Z audience, that 18 to 45-year-old, and that's about 72% of our user base. And then when we look at kind of the intersectionality, unfortunately, we don't have data yet on non-binary because it's such a new segment. But we have 45% male viewers and 55% female viewers. Now, the interesting, subtext to the female viewer, they're not all queer or lesbian or, bi or pan or any female queer identifying orientation or gender. They're actually, just like, I always say, use RuPaul's Drag Race as an example, predominantly allied heterosexual women. RuPaul is a phenomenon in the sense that, she brought drag to the mainstream in a very big way. Now she's bringing drag internationally with all the kind of localized spin-offs with Drag Race Canada, Holland, Spain, Australia. And what's really interesting is we have a very similar audience pattern, which, is mainstream. That is that female allied audience that watches and engages and, sees queer content as entertaining, right? It's like Queer Eye. I always use that example. Like Queer Eye was not made for an LGBTQ audience. It was made for an allied audience. It's really, groundbreaking because it's showing the identity of our community in a bigger way on a major platform like Netflix. And so what that change that comes out of that audience segment is it normalizes, in our societal kind of, upbringing, that LGBTQ is no different than any other minority group, and that, we should be accepting them. And we are embracing that now, right now, especially with the new administration, we're embracing that, in a very big way. Obama did, and of course now Biden's carrying that legacy and creating his own this way. So it's an exciting time. That impact is, we're going to see some really big, dramatic, sweeping change. And I'm personally proud to be a leader in that change with, just this one organization of Revry.
No, that's great. And maybe Wolf, you can tell me a little bit about, or tell us really about why you were interested in the Pride Fund when we started that, right? And I remember you coming up to me and saying, look, I've traveled around the country and this is what I've heard. And I think it was really interesting. I mean, it's literally why we had this discussion. We started the Pride Fund. We're able to meet great people like Damian and others as well. And we feel like we're impacting the community in a very unique way. So yeah, just love to hear about, share some of those insights that you shared with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Also, Andy, you put a great question there, and I'm excited for us to answer that here in just a moment. So the Pride Fund was born out of the partnership between my firm Atlas, which is essentially a nationwide group that helps identify venture firms and partners that are helping to diversify the venture landscape, and Loud Capital, which is venture for people through and through. And us having these late night conversations while we were traveling the country together, doing a program called Radical Collaboration about what would a specific fund be How does it help the community? And a little bit to Andy's point, how does it authentically empower and uplift the individuals and inspire the next generation of leaders to realize that venture is absolutely not for everybody, but it should be equally available to everyone. So in so many of those late night conversations in those different cities with Navin and Ryan and Chase and Caroline and the entire team, it really came to, who do we know that needs this help at this moment in a way that no one is addressing? And there are amazing funds out there that are helping to solve diversifying what venture is for Black and Brown communities. And there are some phenomenal ones doing it for women founders and different regional ones. But we could not find one that was specifically supporting the LGBT community in a very impactful way. And I'm a product of that community. So I was raised by Gunkles and Gants in the Short North before the Short North was cool in Columbus. And they were my earliest mentors. They were the groups that inspired me to really go on out there. And unfortunately, some of them aren't with us anymore. And so getting to do this work allows me to connect with more amazing individuals and partners, not only locally, but across the country, and really help founders that normally felt as though they weren't able to bring their full self to the table. And venture is, it's a beautiful machine that is very subjective, and there aren't sort of regulations or anything that says you can't discriminate, because you meet someone and then you have your opinions of them. And unfortunately, in the traditional VC world, that excluded a lot of folks who were not that standard Caucasian young straight dude. And so just with the connections, we put together that team of our original venture partners, including Denzel and Michael and Tom and June, and just had these conversations about, can we do this? Should we do this? And with the resounding yes, we hit that ground running. And fortunately have been able to bring in an amazing team of advisors, a phenomenal group of investors that I'll point out, most of our investors are allies. A lot are not, but most are, because they see the vision and they understand that when someone from the community steps up, the community supports them. And so that's one of our really strong strategic advantages as a fund, is that we have this great network that supports everything from Wonder for the CBD drink to Revry for the media company to Optic Surge for the med tech. And we have doctors who have come in to invest because we're supporting a lesbian founder. And it's really quite great. And the partnership we have between Atlas and Loud allows us to really do the diligence and dig deep and learn from a firm which is more established at doing this traditionally, and then bring all of that back to founders like Damian.
Yeah, and I want to, and then that's great. And that was a really good background on how this, your mindset, why you approached, Loud and said, let's do this together. And why, to me, my mind's been blown on how much I'm learning. And, Andy, when you're asking, is this considered kind of exploitation of sexual orientation? I actually want to hear from Damian. And I will tell you, though, real quick, I think it's important that when you're specifically looking at a community, number one, I believe in bringing value. I think everyone here does. You bring value first. And if you're bringing value, and then you will get buy-in. And if you're getting buy-in, you continue to bring value. And it just becomes this thing that you are filling a gap. And another thing we're extremely conscious of, and this is early in the Pride Fund, days of, should we ensure that we have representation on the ownership of the fund during the growth of the fund and the strategy in the board meeting? So if you are trying to help a group of people, but that no one's represented in your boardroom, even on the cap table, the upside, the benefits, the struggles, then that is the dinosaur antiquated way to do it, and happening a lot, by the way, around the world. We are absolutely making sure that representation is everywhere. And again, maybe Damian or Wolf, feel free to chime in, but it's a great question. But the exploitation, probably not even a word. I'm literally using this word because I'm reading your question, but I don't even like that word doesn't even enter my mind, although it's a great question.
So I'll jump in. It is a great question because look, we don't so much experience it from, you know, a founder perspective because we're authentically, you know, who we are. Like Aaliyah and Chris went to law school together, knew each other for years. LaShawn and I worked on many productions. We were all friends. So this was organic. It was not planned or forced between our equal founding team. Really, it was, how can we come together with our four skill sets and, you know, support a business and grow it and scale it, which we've done, I think, pretty rapidly in just 5.5 years. And I'm really excited to see what the next 5.5 years are going to bring us. Sky's the limit. But when, you know, there is a term in the community that you'll see with brands jumping into this space, typically around, let's say, Pride season. Like I'm sure Columbus has their Pride Week or Pride Month, and other cities like San Francisco, New York, and LA. And all of a sudden, like, you know, Evian water and, you know, Chevy like puts up a rainbow flag and wants to promote their product with, you know, maybe some creative. And that's called pink washing. And you've seen this probably in headlines and articles before in the past during Pride season, which is coming up. It's in June. But you know, my job, and I'll tell you, like, my job outside of being CEO and running finance and raising capital is I run our sales team. And our sales team, you know, are actually all different facets. I have queer, ironically enough. We have a really diverse sales team, including our staff as well. I'm very proud, actually. I'll tell you another statistic. We're 70% of our staff are people of color and 62% are women. And that, again, was not forced. That was completely by finding great talent, right? That's that, and giving people opportunities that don't come from Ivy League schools. That was another big part of our strategy. Because I have hired a few Ivy Leaguers and they're not necessarily the best talent, ironically enough. No shade to anyone who went to an Ivy League who's listening right now. But going back to, I can talk on a lot of different topics. I'll go from here to here. But going back to kind of the pink washing conversation, look, at the end of the day, if that brand authentically wants to tap into that 965 billion disposable income in the United States, that 5.6% of our population, the smartest thing they can do is align with leadership that is authentically part of that community and create something that is not just the 30 days in June, but extends past through hopefully 365 days a year. Great example I'll use is Lexus. Lexus was an inbound call 6.5 months like after we launched consumer facing. We launched at San Francisco Pride in June of 2016. In January of 2017, I had an inbound from the agency on record who represents you know, all the diversity dollars for Lexus, saying they wanted to advertise with us. We weren't even working with advertisers yet. Of course, when you get that type of a phone call, yes, we do work with advertisers, and we definitely want to work with Lexus. But the difference between Lexus and like any other brand is they do it 365 days a year. They have created social capital in many different diverse markets, not just LGBTQ, Hispanic, African American, Asian. Like you can see, they create commercial. They work with brands and publishers and platforms like Revry that are led by, for, and by, did all these different communities. They have built out an amazing, amazing team of agencies and representatives and planners and buyers that understand, because they're authentically part of the community. And it's why I lease a Lexus today, not just because, you know, they're our biggest advertiser, because I want to represent the brand that represents our community or invest in our community. And so that is super important, you know, and Lexus is probably one of the #1 car brands among LGBTQ people because they've been doing it for over a decade. It's just smart business now, right? And so even from a perspective of whether you're a fund like Pride Fund or you're a brand like Lexus, like there is just, there's a lot of untapped opportunity. There's a lot of untapped talent. And going back to Venture for People, which I am a huge fan of that mission, the next generation of consumer wants not just an authentic leadership and authentic creative, but they want to see that, like Navin was talking about, the board, the upside, the people who work for the fund are all authentically part of the community, because then it creates a drive, an emotional response that makes us feel good about what we're doing, whether you're an LP in a fund or whether you're an advertiser, macro or micro to Revry. And we're creating the next generation of wealth, which is not one race, not one gender, and not one sexual orientation.
Yeah, that was a great comprehensive response there. But what else, could you teach us about needs of the community? And so it was a really good example on the Lexus, on a brand that's been supporting the community for a long time, and now it's coming full circle where, hey, there's more people buying a Lexus because we see them as authentic and supporting the community. What things, again, are we taking for granted that we should be paying attention to? And again, if you are an entrepreneur and you're saying, wow, Damian has convinced me that I should pay attention to this 5-6% in this country that represent a lot of wealth and a lot of need, what are some low-hanging fruit, maybe basic things that I take for granted, perhaps, that you or Wolf could teach me about or tell me about? And this is honestly where I get really excited on entrepreneurship and thinking about problems and how we can help people, and building something or spending time on something that benefits the community.
Yeah. Well, I'll give a quick answer because Damian should answer this question. But for us, the concept has always been that allyship should be assumed. If you're not an ally, you're a jerk. I've never said that without cursing before. So what it really breaks down to is like, that is the entry level. So if you're a good human, you should be an ally to all other humans. And that means not getting in the way of their success and paying attention and embracing their differences. The next step up from that is to become an advocate for them, to share on social media, share the information about them, support their businesses by shopping at their stores and helping to spread the word about it. And then the third tier is to really become an accomplice on their success. And that's where our investors come on in to put money in to say, we want to support these companies, where it's really having those conversations and actively trying to be a partner rather than just a consumer. And that's the reason why when we started this partnership, the first thing that we did was bring all of my staff and all of your staff together for the gender bias training, which we did at Stonewall. Was we had Ashton come on out and say, okay, ask me anything. Ashton is an amazing advisor of ours now, but at that point he was just a friend who gives these presentations to corporate HR departments and says, this is a safe space. I want to hear your questions so that you don't make anyone uncomfortable by them asking, and then just walked us through all of those steps. And that's a level of digging a little bit deeper. And I think that that's an opportunity for everyone, whether they're in a space where they're participating or whether they're running a product or whether they're trying to get involved, because the pink washing is so real. I mean, we see it in Columbus for the Pride Parade, that there isn't a logo that doesn't have a rainbow on it. And it's very obvious to see the brands that are throwing money at putting rainbows up versus the brands that are supporting their teams to take time off work so that they can participate in different organizations and putting together those affinity groups. And if you look at Beam Dental or Cover My Meds or one of our other larger startups in Columbus, you can really see how much they care about the community. And it makes their team so much stronger to have those very unique individuals bringing their voices and their selves to the table. So when it does come time for the Pride Parade, which Denzel, our CEO, would want me to point out, it is now a Pride March, not a parade, but that they are that they are showcasing the best of what they do 365, rather than them pausing things to do a marketing tactic.
And just to kind of piggyback off of what Wolf's saying, look, pink washing is only bad, and I'll bookend this, when it's not authentically led, right? And again, I always go back to this whole thing of authenticity. I know that we're gonna, June is always it's one of the busiest and, money making months for us because brands jump in. My, goal is that we educate them on the opportunity beyond June. So then they invest more into Hispanic History Month, because we have great Hispanic content, including an entire live channel dedicated to Spanish-speaking LGBTQ people, Revry Latinx. We have African American History Month in February. We have LGBTQ History Month in October. We're 365, baby. Like, we're not just June. You need to be, come on, let's get you going. Let's, maybe the jump start is June, and then we show them the opportunity and we keep them going all year round. But the other side of this, and this is where pink washing does happen, is, LGBTQ is not a charity. And that's typically where those dollars will go, is NGOs. And some of them are run like major corporations. I'm not going to name names, but they generate a lot more revenue. I don't know if, you can't call it revenue. They generate a lot more donations, both corporate and private, than we can raise capital for as a for-profit media company. And I think like changing the mindset from the perspective of someone who maybe is high wealth, who wants to put money into Pride Fund and Loud Capital to invest via their vehicles into businesses in their portfolio like Revry, but also not to just write that check for that NGO, because they're probably not, and if it's a national NGO, they're not struggling as hard as we are. And to answer the question back to Navin, like the low-hanging fruit, if you're an entrepreneur, your greatest power is not just your authenticity, but it's the fact that if you are in a diverse minority group, especially today. Forbes had an article in 2018 that came out where they actually did a study on minority founding teams that gross 30 to 40% higher margins than your average cisgender heteronormative men, who obviously can raise capital a lot faster than the four of us can, because they have more opportunity to do that, because there's more people who look like them sitting at the top writing those checks, right? Now, why do you think that minority study grosses 30 to 40% higher margins? We fight for every dollar 10 times harder than our counterparts, because it took us 1,000 times a lot harder to even just get the attention of someone like Pride and Loud. And I remember when Pride Fund came out, I had every investor, advisor, I even had family members in Toronto who like saw the news articles about you guys write me and say, you should hit them up, and it was through Goldman Sachs that we finally got the introduction, because we were participating in the Latinx and Black First cohort, which was also a big game changer for us last summer. And Goldman Sachs, look, they're investing, not taking any equity. They're not, they created a program for mentorship and acceleration of Latinx and Black founders. We were lucky enough to be part of that first cohort. The second one's about to be announced very soon. But like, that should say something. One of the oldest financial institutions in the world creating and carving out a space for Black and brown founders, and including LGBTQ somewhat in that as well, and that's huge. That's like, that's a message that goes beyond everyone on this call, right? When I had the pleasure of meeting David Solomon, the CEO, we each got to ask him like 2 questions. My questions were not about that. He's a DJ at night. That's his philanthropy. And I was like, how do you do that? Where did you learn that? Like, screw the business. Like, I want to know, like, how do you balance your time? Like, as the CEO of Goldman Sachs. And he laughed because I was the only one that asked a non-business related question, and told me his honest truth. He actually told me he was trained by the chain smokers, ironically enough. But you know, and that's what I strive to be. Like, I want to do that when I'm, you know, a little bit older and a little more established. I want to be a philanthropist DJ at Coachella who just plays when they want to, you know, and that's all possible. You know, the world is opening up, and the biggest, I think, if you're a new and young entrepreneur who wants to jump in and has a great idea, you have to have passion, you have to have a thick skin, you have to learn a new language, you know, and you have to, you know, you have to learn to fail a million times before you can succeed, and embrace that failure and learn from it every time, because that's what is going to be your life training. And that's where eventually some, you know, one of your ideas will succeed. I've failed thousands of times before I even started Revry. And I realized in those failures, those were my greatest accomplishments, because it brought me to the place that I'm sitting today, which is succeeding in a really big way. And LaShawn, Aaliyah, and Chris will echo that as well. You know, so my one word to summarize is, you know, your greatest strength is what you probably perceive to be a weakness.
That's great. And, you know, you hit the nail on the head when you said the obstacles that you've had to face. And a lot of folks, people of color, women, I mean, you know, our investment thesis, we have about 45% we've invested in, you know, people of color, women, and people are always like, oh, wow, that's a great stat. That's way higher than national. And the thing is, when you talk to people and you know entrepreneurship, and you know that there's going to be a million obstacles ahead of you, well, there's a lot of proven people out there. And guess what? Being in your own skin and in your environment, you've actually had to prove yourself already before you even went down this entrepreneurial journey. So that's really the secret sauce. You literally nailed it. That is my intention personally. And I think the whole Loud and Atlas family is to talk about this more. Is, you know, I think, Ron, you asked this great question. How do we nudge VCs? How do we nudge people? How do we, you know, number one, we need to start talking about it. And it can't just come from people in the community. I'm a straight brown dude here from Ohio that has, you know, is part of a pride fund, right? That's pretty like not normal. But the greatest thing is like, how did you get into that? Why are you into that? And I like to talk about it because it's exactly how you start the nudge. And then when you start putting money, and we're going to have great exits in progress, they're not going to say, oh, you know, you did a great job and you got those stats up and you did well. You have great intentions. No. I'm purpose and then profit. And both of those boxes are checked. It does feel good. It seems like the right thing to do because, as Wolf said, we really all should be allies. To me, it's like business 101. It just, people haven't figured that out yet. And so the more we talk about it, the more we actually invest our own money and time and put our reputations on the line, people will take it more seriously. At least that's one of my answers to you, Ron, on that.
And if I can just add, go ahead, Will.
Oh, I'll be super quick. I just want to point out we're taking it to the next level as well, where this is a $10 million fund and it's doing wonderful things, and we're very, very proud of it. But we have an opportunity to do so much more. So if you take a look at a fund like Sound Ventures, based here in LA, they want to invest in more LGBTQ plus businesses, but they don't have a way to say, hey, if you are a member of the community, send us your stuff. However, we get a lot of deal flow from individuals that are just looking, and we're not going to be able to cut a $5 million check. But when someone comes to us and they're looking for that larger check, we know who the allies, the advocates, and the accomplices are within the industry. And they're, in a way, coming out to us and saying, send us more of these deals, send us more of these partnerships. And I believe that, I mean, we're working on a deal right now with someone who is looking to bring in 8 million, which we're participating, but we're not able to do that. But we're able to reach out to these other partners and say, will you go alongside us? Will you partner with us? Because this is great. And we have some access to be able to streamline that process that others don't have, because we have such phenomenal deal flow from the community because of just the thesis that we work off of.
And
Sorry,
just,
Damon.
no,
Damien, that went on longer.
No, that you said that perfectly, and also just kind of echo off Navin. I think, you know, the biggest thing is when you look at like angel groups, right? And just to talk kind of a little about, I can give you lots of pros and cons on angel groups. They all have different kind of backgrounds. They typically are very social. I always call them, they're a social club that invests, right? That's kind of really what angel groups are about, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, they're de-risk. You know, and it's ironic because when you look at the definition of an angel and where that actual word came from, it was about support for underrepresented people. That's, you know, the actual term of angel investment. But that's not necessarily where angel groups all invest or focus their time in. They look for things that are sure wins. And then venture capital, you know, VC funds, not like Pride necessarily, but, you know, more the institutionalized ones at the top in New York City or in San Francisco are looking for that high quick return or the next Uber or Airbnb. So they're not betting on people like Loud is and Pride is. They're betting on return to return the fund. And I think so it's, look, the catch-22 is that how do you find that balance of purpose and profit? I'm going to steal that, Navin, from you, because you kind of summarized what I said earlier too. That's a great kind of high-level version of that, because the people are ready to go in our community, and especially the minority founders, and we're poised to do the work. We may not have like 5 or 3 or 2 successful exits. We may not have raised capital before because we've not been given access to it. This is a new sector. This is a new movement. This is something that has not been done traditionally in venture and angel groups, right? But again, there is so much data. Starr put out a study about this. Gangels has a study about this. Out in Tech has a study about this. Lesbians Who Tech has a study about this. Forbes, like I was quoting before, had a study about this. So now we have to turn the tide at the top, that 1%, to get them to realize that, like, stop just, you know, giving money to the minority groups who are NGOs so you have that write-off on your balance sheet when you do your taxes, and invest in them in a different way than you are just your real estate. Think about taking a little bit more risk like you would in a market and putting it into Pride and Loud to do that legwork and that sweat equity to deploy to folks like us who may need a little bit more handholding or mentorship or advisory, you know, as we kind of scale and grow our business, because we've never been given that opportunity or never had that seat at the table before. Now we are, and the tide is completely turning and shifting, and hopefully the world's waking up in a big way.
And I will say that, yeah, go ahead, Wolf.
So just to build on that a little bit, the thing that keeps me awake at night is not worrying about our founders or our deal flow or getting our investors, but it's us being very successful as a fund. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you take a look at all the funds that some of these investors get into, they'll do small checks because they want to support the community, they want to do that kind of stuff. But to really change the industry, not just for the Pride community, but for new Americans, for different communities, we need to get those results. And if at 11 years from now, we have an investor that took a look and said, okay, I jumped on board with this because I wanted to, but wow, they support their companies in a different way. They bring in the community. They do stuff like filming television shows across the country and things like that. And all those things lead to greater success for our companies, and they have stronger exits and we have better partnership. That is how we are going to change the industry, and have it not be such a philanthropic program. So yeah. Chase, who is an amazing part of our team, his job is to figure out how we can make our companies the most successful so that we have the returns so that others follow our lead.
Yeah, and one of my, criticisms of the venture industry, I'm in the venture industry, so I'm criticizing myself as well, is venture is supposed to be or include some risk, right? And risk to me is just unknowns. And sometimes you just have to move forward. And what I've observed in the venture industry is that there's so many great firms that I have respect for that are shying away from risk and trying to fill up that unknown with data. And the problem is, there isn't great data from the LGBTQ plus community. There's not. Guess why? Because no one's been doing it. So there needs to be people and companies that take risk. So eventually we could perhaps have some data and exits and traction. So we are one of them. It doesn't keep me up at night. It actually feels really darn good. But I like to call on our fellow colleagues in the venture world just to remember that risk is literally our job. And by taking risk, right, we talk about personal growth and, putting yourself in an uncomfortable position is growth. That is same for a company and a firm in an industry. And so my call to action for everyone out there in the venture world, especially people who have way more money than our funds and way more years behind them outside of almost 6 years, please just try to go back to risk to help your company grow, help your brand grow, and to prevent yourself from becoming a dinosaur. Because literally that's the antiquated, complacent companies that we're trying to disrupt. The venture companies within the industry, I see as some of them are dinosaurs. So that's just something I like to talk about openly.
And what's interesting too, just to kind of, again, I know that we keep going down like all these rabbit holes, but it's a great conversation. And I love having these conversations. We're seeing a lot of these guys, like the big VC firms, like, oh, you know what, we're going to carve out like, the minority little fund here for small checks that we're going to deploy. Come on. It's just like every business and corporation hiring a D&I officer. We're not charity people. Like stop treating minority founders and minority businesses as charity, because when you look at the data, minorities will overtake what you see as majority by 2040. The predominant population of the United States will be Hispanic, not anything else, right? There's data and studies that prove that. So if you're not part of that movement now, I'm afraid for your investment portfolio. Definitely not you guys. We're talking about those folks that Navin and I were talking about earlier, like those mainstreams, because I don't think that consumers are shifting. The younger generation, especially Gen Z, millennial, they want mission-led, they want authenticity, they want to have themselves reflected on every level of business, from board to C-suite, to startup. And if their brand or that fund is not doing that, I just don't know how you'll survive in, the next generation of this world. And I do want to say, I did see a question from Natalie. I'm just searching through that was really good. Sorry.
Yeah. Natalie, if you'd like to just ask it.
Yeah, ask the question.
Yeah.
Trying to read the chat and look.
Yeah, I know it's hard to multitask.
Yeah.
So Damian, I'm just wondering, like, as the business has grown, what's been the most unexpected surprise, or a couple of them? Because I know it might be hard to kind of narrow that down.
No, I can quickly answer. There's two. Meeting fucking amazing people like Wolf and Navin and having them embrace our business in such a big way. I can't tell you how excited. We have the best pool of investors, even just outside of it. We have Arlen Hamilton from Backstage Capital.
Yeah.
We have Bobek and Pilar from Debut Capital. We have some kick-ass people who are behind us 100%. We have trans people, we have lesbian, we have gay, we have majority allies. We have so many different races, cultures, and backgrounds that have invested in Revry, and I cannot be prouder of our cap table today. I don't think there's anyone that I don't love, but I will say the most exciting ones are the ones that are creating change with their fund, like Loud, like Debut, like Pride, like Backstage, because they're the ones that are evangelizing and doing the hard work for us and bringing us more of the opportunity to be able to scale and grow that business. So that is definitely, that was something I did not expect. And it took a few years before we got to meet these folks, or before these opportunities and vehicles even existed. Because remember, we started in late 2015, November 2015 was when we had the idea. 2016 was when we started our launch. And then the flip side to the other question on a social impact, it's seeing and hearing from the consumers that we have met across the globe. I'm very blessed and lucky that I travel the most out of the 4 co-founders, being the CEO. And I've done a lot of our biz dev work as well. Obviously, when you're early on, you're wearing multiple hats, just the nature of the game. But we put ourselves out there a lot. We went to film festivals in Israel, Brazil, France. And in 2019, I had the pleasure to travel to Mumbai, India, a place in the world I've always wanted to go, but never thought I'd have a reason to be there. Kashish is the LGBTQ film festival, which was celebrating its 10th year, and they made me their keynote speaker and brought me out. And it was so exciting to be there for that week, because I saw an entirely different culture that I had never experienced my entire life. I met some of the most amazing, passionate people, but the experience that I evangelize and talk about on so many, probably heard this in other interviews and in press too, if you've followed us, that I always talk about, is we had this one original title 2 years prior in 2017 that we licensed as an original and then eventually acquired, called The Other Love Story. It's a half Hindi, half English lesbian drama digital series, so short form, by this amazing producer, good friend Harini, who's in London, that was shot authentically in Bangalore. And we released it and it blew up. Like, we had all this data and all this traffic from India. But I, other than like seeing numbers and spikes and, Google Analytics, like, we're like, great, this is amazing. We want to like, do more and like find stuff. So let's find an excuse to like go to India and connect with, filmmakers there. That's always the first touch point for us, is getting the content and then marketing the content, distributing it through our vehicle. But I had on opening night, they made me go up and, they actually did a very cool traditional Indian candle lighting and incense lighting. And they had all the, the keynotes, which was me and a few other people, go up and do it in front of the whole audience after the screening. And then we had the reception. And so I got to introduce myself to, the entire audience. And I had this line of queer female filmmakers who wanted to meet me and take my photo. I was like a celebrity for a day. It was so weird, not used to that. And one of them, which is now a good friend of mine, came up to me and she's like, Damian, I just want to show you why we want to meet you. And I'm like, is it because of The Other Love Story? She's like, yeah, but beyond just distributing that title and, really marketing it, not just in the West, but in the East, I want to show you something. And she pulls out her phone and like shows me her Tinder. Like, why are you showing me your dating app? And she's like, you need to see this. And she funnels for like lesbian or women who love women. That was kind of the translation there in Hindi. And all of the images on the grid were images of The Other Love Story. It's how queer females identify themselves on dating apps for fear of discretion, right? Because for context, we had Stonewall 52 years ago. They only decriminalized LGBTQ in 2018. They moved very fast socially, but it was like still obviously not totally socially accepted for your job, your family, your place that you live. And so that's how they identify themselves. And I lost my shit. I started crying. I woke up, my co-founders, Aaliyah, LaShawn, and Chris in the West. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, like back here in Los Angeles, and told them the story and FaceTime with this, amazing human being who, showed me her Tinder. And I'm like, you know what? This is so fucking cool because, at the end of the day, what do we all want to do as entrepreneurs? We want to help change the world. And that was one of those moments that will always be with me, where I had that little glimpse into like, I'm actually doing something way bigger than myself, and I wake up every day and I, talk about this and many other stories from queer kids and queer folks across the globe who are using our platform to help themselves feel okay, feel accepted, feel like they have a chosen or, an extended family in some way, because they may not live in a place that has the same freedoms that we do here. And to me, that is the greatest gift from my job ever.
That's an amazing story.
Thanks. I like tear up even like talking.
I know.
That and the lack of sleep.
No, that's great. That's the second time I heard it, but it still feels intense. And it also reminds me of Wolf when you told me about the Pride Fund, and we got in PitchBook the Pride Fund was announced in it, and it went kind of viral all over the world. And Wolf, just share a few, I know we only have a few minutes, share a few things that people reached out to when they heard that the Pride Fund existed, what it meant for people.
Yeah. It was overwhelming, like in all the right ways. We had so many founders who came out, and some who came out to their companies to be able to do this because we offered that opportunity. And then what I thought was even more incredible was we had all these VCs that were across the country, and quite frankly, Canada really loves PitchBook, we learned. And they essentially said, I'm the only gay person that I know in the industry. And some were out, some were not, but it really coalesced. One of our greatest strengths as an organization is we have this very dynamic advisory board, which a lot of them are our investors, a lot of them are our partners. Some run organizations like Angels and NGLCC and Start Out, but they're really our team. And I wish I could show a video of one of our pep rallies, because it's the best example of Zoom that I've ever seen. But it's all of these individuals who are just so excited to be able to participate. And we work with them on their expertise. So when a medical deal comes through, I'll of course send it to you, Navin, with your medical background, but we'll also send it to our advisors, and we'll keep them engaged. And then if we decide to invest in those companies, they then become essentially a marketing tool from their community, from somewhere across the country to that company. And that is just really rare in venture. Like, you don't get advisors without giving a share of the GP. You don't get, we are very fortunate to have just such a big, like, second circle of our team with those that they're the ones who are telling everybody about Revry every day. They're telling all their friends, oh, they're shooting the show, they're coming to the city. And they're also the ones who are lining up our investor meetings. And we stumbled into this happy surprise. But I talk about it often because I want other groups that are impact driven to replicate it, because if they do well, we all do well. And that's really where I think venture needs to go. And I'm so excited to be working with you, Navin, and the Loud team and everyone to have a partner to help us get there.
Yeah, and I know we're pretty much out of time here. I'll just close on this, going back to the Pride Fund and the intangibles, right? We knew we had the intention to do this for the community, but when people found out about it, there was a comfort level already. They felt, wow, there are people that are looking out for our community, which I've never felt in my environment, in my country, or my city, or in my company. So, there's something there that continues to drive me. Again, I heard this story for the second time, Damian, and just like, that's what I'm talking about. That's like purpose, but in a capitalistic, for-profit way, we can get the best of both worlds. That's what I believe. I want to say thanks to Damian for being on this, for I don't know, just for so much that you're going to do with this great team, that you're going to be impacting and educating people. The proud member of the portfolio company of Loud and Pride. And Wolf, back at you. Just really, we're doing really big, impactful things, and we're doing it out of the city of Columbus. But right now we're in LA, and we're doing a lot of international stuff, and we just hope to do well by a lot of people and be extremely loud and open about what we're doing on Venture for People. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks everyone in the future for listening to this. And Damian and Wolf, thank you for your time and your mindset.
Thank you.
And Ron, I'll see you in San Francisco tomorrow morning.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.